Hello and welcome. This is the channel where we talk everything Camino. I'm Camino Candace, and I'm eternally Camino dreaming. Today is part 5 in the logistics series, and we will be talking about cash versus credit and debit cards on the Camino. So the very first thing you need to know is cash is king. This means no matter what, always, always, always have cash on hand for a variety of reasons. One of the biggest, most recent examples is about 2 weeks ago at this point, the entire countries of Portugal and Spain, as well as parts of France, went into a total blackout for a minimum of 6 hours, maybe up to 12 or longer, depending where people were in the country. No power, no electricity, no payment systems were available. Pilgrims who were on the Camino were forced to use only cash for paying at albergues, at restaurants, if they happened to be there at the time, in order to get food from shops. People were in grocery stores taking pictures of the item along with the price tag to go up to the front where they paid, and the clerk would write down the item and cost and manually add up how much they owed, and people would have to pay in cash. Those who did not have cash on hand were borrowing money where they could and repaying, so just keep that in mind. If you borrow cash, pay it back, or pay it forward somehow. Okay. Obviously, the electricity came back on, but it threw a lot of people, especially those of us from North America, out of alignment, shall we say, not knowing what to do without electronic payment systems. Also, we need to have cash on hand at all times, because in those countries, to use your credit card, it can actually charge the merchant quite a large percentage on what you're using. There's definitely places that will allow you to use your credit card along the Camino. However, if you're in more rural areas at smaller bars and cafes, they will sometimes flat out refuse to take a card and it's cash only, or there will be a minimum. And when I say a minimum, it's about €15, which, to us might not seem that big, but when you're in the rural parts of these cities, the costs of food and items are so small that it's actually quite a lot to add up to something as small as €15. And I saw people who were very upset about that. And I think it's fair that when we're traveling, we need to remove any expectations that how things work at home is not necessarily how it's going to work with where we're going. And that applies to wherever you are in the world, to wherever you're going. How things are in Canada are not how they would work in Brazil or India or Britain, and vice versa. For you to be going from Germany to Canada and expect things to work the same, that's not going to be the case. Certain countries, there's a lot of overlap. Germany and Canada, yes. Britain and Canada, yes, of course. But when you get into other mismatches of culture, economy, that sort of thing, not everything is the same. Basically, Portugal, Spain, Italy, Greece, cash is king. Whereas if you go to Britain, they want everything paid by credit card. It's kind of ridiculous on the other end of the spectrum, but hey, that's my personal opinion. So when you're carrying cash on Camino, do your best to ensure you have small bills. And when I say small bills, I mean nothing larger than a 20. Okay? Because especially on Frances, where you can get an albergue for, I think the cheapest I paid was €7. Okay. Yeah, I think there was one donation based, and so paid 10, because that's the average, at least when I went. But 10 to €15 a night, a 20 will suffice. Sometimes they don't have change, so you got to try to scrounge for a 10 and a 5 or 3 5s, that sort of thing. But when you go to a bar and cafe, a €5 bill will go a long way. When I was in Velada, Portugal back in January, sorry. It was the last town for a 17 to 20 kilometer stretch before Santarem that had any food or water. I was staying there for the night because I chose to break that day into two. I didn't feel like walking 32 kilometers that day, and I'm glad I didn't. But I did stop at the local cafe. I had a tea, a pastéis de nata, I had a soup, a Coca-Cola, and I think that was it. And all of that total cost me €5. Okay. That's also where a couple of the Italians I had met at the albergue the night before caught up with me, and we all had something to eat together. They walked with me to my albergue. On the way there, we stopped at a little market for them to pick up some items to make sandwiches as they were continuing on to Santarem, and for them to buy, some buns, a package of cheese, a package of chorizo, and a couple pieces of fruit. Altogether, it came to just over €3. And yes, by North American standards, that is super cheap, muy económico. But by the standards of rural communities and other countries, that can be expensive, okay? So we also have to keep that in mind, hence why smaller bills are always appreciated. I know when I've exchanged money at the currency exchange here in Vancouver, they're always trying to tell me, oh, we can't give you, only 20s, 10s, and 5s. We have to give you some 50s. And then they're nosy as fuck as to why, and it's none of their business, okay? It's hard, even in other countries, to get rid of 50s. Even if you go to the UK, no one wants to change a 50. Heck, even here in Canada, no one wants to change a 50, okay? So when you're traveling rural, small town where you're going to be paying under €5 for a big meal, you don't want anything above a 5 or a 10. So always keep some on hand. If you have to withdraw money at a bank machine, find one. So that brings us to our next item, debit cards, okay, which can be used. Just look for the little plus system. There's a big sign, it's yellow with the plus sign, and it says plus. So as long as that's on your debit cards, you can use it at that machine to withdraw money. It will convert from euros to whatever currency your banking information is in. So mine would go Canadian to euro. And basically the conversion will still only allow you to take out whatever your maximum daily limit is for your bank. Okay, so whatever, if say my limit was 500 Canadian in a day, then I would only be able to take out the equivalent of whatever that is in euros per day at a bank machine. Now, what most people don't realize is when you do make a withdrawal of cash at a bank machine, your bank back home will charge you a fee to use that other bank machine. So that can range anywhere from a percentage of the amount you're withdrawing to a flat fee of $3, $5, depends on your bank. So you have to double check that. Plus, to add insult to injury, that bank machine will also charge you a fee to withdraw cash. And that can range anywhere from €3 to €7. It might be based on the amount you're withdrawing as well. And those bank machine fees will actually be part of whatever your daily withdrawal limit will be. So just keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to credit cards on Camino, as I've said, some places have a minimum. However, if you're in bigger cities, it's not typically a problem, especially if you decide to stay at like pensiones or hotels, which typically operate on a credit card system, or if you've booked your place through an app such as booking.com, you do have to provide your credit cards that's hooked up to that app. So in those ways, it can minimize the amount of cash to carry. or withdraw, but you will always need some cash on you. Another option that is fairly new in Canada, I believe it's been offered elsewhere around the world for much longer. I'm not sure when it came to Canada, maybe within the past year or two, is the Wise card. Now you can get a physical card so that you can withdraw cash at a bank machine wherever you are in the world. And it also has an app which allows you to tap and use it like a debit card wherever you are, as long as they allow debit. The cool thing about Wise is you can hold different wallets in different currencies. So, if you're Canadian, you'll have your original Canadian wallet. You upload your Canadian dollars from your bank account, which is going to be the cheapest way to put money in. You can make payment into that wallet from your credit card. However, you would have to check your credit card to make sure something like that does not count as a cash advance, because that would be subject to very, very high interest fees, immediate interest on day one of withdrawal, and any payment you put towards your credit card first goes to the interest on the cash advance, then the cash advance, then the interest on any actual card purchases, and then the card purchases. So it can add up pretty quick. So it's best to just do a direct debit from your bank account. Wise hooks up directly to that. You do have to provide some information around, how much you plan to use Wise in a year in terms of dollars, what your income is in a year, what your career field is. Yes, for those of you who are not in Canada, depending where you live and are not necessarily subject to this is very nosy and invasive. It's all part of the regulatory system here with the big five. And when I say that, I mean the big five banks and our government. So just keep that in mind. But what you can do is then you can set up other wallets. So if you're going to Europe and you're going to be working in euros, you set up a wallet in euro. Now with Wise, you have to do an initial, what they call payment. And they don't really forewarn you about this. As you're setting up your account, suddenly you're like, okay, now it's time for payment. You're like, what's this payment? Right? And it's like $30 plus a fee based on, is it direct debit from your account? Are you doing it as a bill payment or from your credit card? Cheapest way, like I said, is direct from your bank account. And it's a $30 fee. So basically $30 and the service fee of 9 cents comes out of your bank account. Okay. $30 actually goes into your Canadian wallet. So technically it's only a 9-cent fee, but it's to get you started, I guess, and committed. And then just to make sure it all works. Then from there, if you go into your Euro wallet, you can hit the convert button and it'll pull up, your Canadian to Euro, and you put it, it'll tell you how much is in your Canadian wallet, and you can enter how much of that you want to convert. It'll tell you what that gives you in euros. There is a bit of a transaction fee, which is variable based on the amount you're converting. It does still seem to be cheaper than, say, going to the currency exchange here in Vancouver or dealing with a bank. But what this does is it allows you, when you're traveling, like I said, you can use your physical card at a bank machine or tap your phone or even the card at a debit station for payment if that's being offered. Now, when you use the card at a bank machine, you really have to read the rules, because Wise will only allow 2 transaction fee-free withdrawals per month. Now, each withdrawal can only be up to 350 Canadian twice per month, which isn't really a whole lot in euros. At an exchange rate of $1.60 Canadian for €1, that will come to about 210 euro per withdrawal. Okay. Anything over the $350 Canadian amount in one withdrawal, anything above that, so from $351 and up, will be subject to a 1.75% fee. on that remaining balance. Okay, so keeping that in mind, it might actually be better to do a larger withdrawal within those 2 per month, because as of the third withdrawal in a month and above, it's the 1.75% transaction fee plus $1.50. So that can add up. And if you're smart about, when you're withdrawing money, that sort of thing, in the end, it doesn't seem to work out to any more than using your bank back home. But if you're taking out smaller amounts, I think it works out to fairly equivalent. I haven't sat to do the full math, but it's maybe like a couple dollars difference. So it's really just about the hassle. I'll be giving it a go next time I'm in Europe. And for me, I feel like it's also going to add just an extra level of, options in case, worst comes to worst. Like, what if you're using your actual bank debit card in a bank machine, the bank machine eats it, or your bank decides to shut your card down because they think it's fraud, right? So these are things to keep in mind. There's lots of options, but cash is always king. It should always be the primary method that you use to pay where possible. Help the locals out. Don't charge them. Don't make them pay for fees just because you're used to using a credit card. Okay. I mean, like I said, if you're at a hotel or pensione, where, you're probably paying €100 or more, and they have a whole credit card system, that's a different situation. But, a small town place where the bar is like homemade bean and sausage soup, like at one place on Francaise, and the bowl was huge. It was like as big as my head, and it was like, that's about what, like 6 inches deep, and that thing was like not even €3, and it was some of the best food I had on the whole Camino. So when you're in these local areas, do your best, pay with cash. And also, don't be upset when they say no card is accepted. That is a North American developed country privilege. And I think it's important to keep in mind that we do have a lot more options here in Canada and the US than people do in other countries. And although Europe is very well developed, there are still places that are struggling in comparison to other parts of the continent. And, bringing some awareness to that is just really important, and being humble. Part of the Camino is learning how to be humble with like your own stuff, with other people's things. But overall, just go enjoy the ride, carry cash, use card when it's appropriate, and just enjoy your time. So I hope that helps provide some options for you as to knowing what's in store. Now, if you're on Norte, one final thing, it is the most expensive Camino. And so you're more likely going to be using things like a credit card along there, especially in the first section where it's highly touristic: San Sebastian, Bilbao, Santander, that sort of thing. So it might not be as big of an issue there, but definitely on Francaise, definitely on Portuguese, cash. And even on Norte, you should probably still be carrying cash, because at a certain point you're going through smaller towns anyways. Okay, and they'll appreciate the effort and the consideration. So that wraps up our logistics series in 5 parts. So if anything else comes to mind, I'll pop it up. But otherwise, until next time, Buen Camino.